All right, veuillez vous lever. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Steinberg, you've now sent the email, is that it?
That's correct, Your Honor. I do apologize for the delay, but we had some difficulties with the email system.
Yeah, we too experienced that difficulty of technical problem with the email system. All right, we will get back to it, but not now. Well, okay, thank you. Ms. Renton, please proceed.
Witness, before lunch, you were telling us about some of the names that were used to describe the Kikuyus at rallies. Why did the Kalenjin refer to Kikuyus as white or Mzungu?
Ndio waliitwa mzungu, yani.
Answer. Yes, they would use the word chumbeg in Nandi, which meant mzungu. And the Kikuyu, well, this meant that the Kikuyu were not welcome and that the region did not belong to them. So, as a result, the Kikuyus had to leave.
Are you able to help us with the spelling of the Kalenjin word chumbeg?
I think we can do phonetic. Let's not do the spelling. Did you say the word is chumbeg?
Chumbeg.
Let's work.
Answer. Yes, chumbeg.
Phonetically, that would be Chumbeg. Phonetically, we can verify that later, unless you really want him to spell it himself.
That's fine, Your Honor.
What I wanted to know, Counsel, is whether Muzungu necessarily refers to Europeans or whether it means stranger.
Sorry, Your Honor, would you like me to clarify that with the witness?
I think I can ask him. Sir, you said that the reference, that you said that Chumbeg translated to Muzungu, and Muzungu is the Kiswahili word. My question is, does the word Muzungu or even Chumbeg refer to the color of somebody's skin as being European, for example, or does it mean a stranger, so that even though the person may not have European skin, they may be perceived as a stranger?
Ndivyo, sio mwili wa mzungu lakini ni mgeni.
Answer. Yes, indeed. It wasn't with regard to the white colour of a person's skin, but it meant that the person was a foreigner and that the person did not hail from that region.
Thank you very much. Please proceed, Ms. Renton.
Witness, you've also said that they were described as Madoadoa. First of all, what language is Madoadoa?
Madoadoa ni lugha ya Kiswahili.
Answer. Madoa-doa is a Swahili term.
And what does it mean?
Ilikuwa ikimaanisha hawataki kabila nyingine. Kikuyu ni madoa-doa. Wabaki.
Answer. It means that the Kikuyu were not welcome there and that they should go home.
Where is home for the Kikuyu? Where did they mean when they said they should go home?
Wakikuyu huwa wakisema kwao ni Central Province.
Answer. They said that the region belonging to the Kikuyu was the Central Province.
One second, Your Honour. Witness, did you attend any political meetings, or do you know about any political meetings that took place before the 2007 elections?
Objection, Mr. President. The witness did say earlier that he did not attend any political rallies. So we are going back to a question that was already asked and answered. Thank you.
Ms. Renton.
I can ask a clarification question. I'm actually referring to something different in my question.
Yes, I noticed that the operative word in your question this time is meetings. The last time it was rally.
That's correct, Your Honour.
So they don't necessarily mean the same thing. So go ahead.
Witness, I'll repeat my question. You said you did not attend any rallies. You've told us some information that you heard about rallies. Did you attend or did you hear about any political meetings that took place during this time?
Ndiyo.
Answer. Yes. Yes.
Please tell us.
Wajua, wakati watu wametoka katika mikutano ya kisiasa, wakifika nyumbani, kila mtu anaongea vile anavyotaka na vile alisikia.
When people talk about political meetings, about having attended such political meetings, they come back and report what was said during those meetings. So, if you like, it's a way of talking about those individuals who took the floor during said meetings.
Mr. Witness, did anyone come back and report about meetings to you? And if so, please refer to the list if necessary.
Ndiyo.
Sir, yes.
Mtu nambari ya kwanza alikuwa wa karibu sana na mimi.
The person number 1 on the list, notably, was close to me.
What did person number 1 tell you?
Mr. President, the witness did not say that person number 1 said anything to him. The witness said person number 1 was close to me.
It's a matter of...
I'll withdraw the objection. Let the witness answer.
Well, it's a matter of clarification, of course. I mean, you were not necessarily objecting, because it would have required counsel to ask that question to...
Yes, but I just withdraw the objection.
Yes.
Let the witness answer.
All right. You can ask the question again if you also want to take a hint from what happened to clarify whether person number 1 had indeed linked to a rally, so it's clear on the record. That's what the witness is saying.
Witness, I asked you whether anyone came back and reported about meetings to you. You said yes. The person number 1 on the list, notably, was close to me. Did person number 1 tell you anything about meetings?
Ndiyo.
So yes.
1 second. We will take the answer to this question in private session, and then we'll come back out.
Nous sommes en audience publique, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, we are in public session.
Thank you. Prosecutor, please proceed.
Witness, still referring to the big meeting in Kapsaret, how many people were at this meeting?
Huo mkutano siwezi kukisia ni watu wangapi, lakini walikuwa...
Answer. I cannot tell you how many people attended, but there were many people in attendance.
You mentioned that some dignitaries attended. Which dignitaries attended this meeting?
Watu wakubwa walihudhuria mkutano huo. Hapakuwa na kabila lingine.
Answer. Those dignitaries did not belong to a tribe other than the Kalenjin tribe.
Who were they? Can you give us their names, please?
Haya majina kama vile nilivyosema hapo mbeleni.
Sir, as I said a short while ago, the names, well, all the meetings that took place were often called or convened by Mr. Ruto. And Ruto was a well-respected man in the Rift Valley. Whenever he convened a meeting, people would attend from all over. Rich people would join him at the meetings.
Hivyo sio mtu mmoja ama watu wawili, walikuwa watu wengi.
So, I cannot tell you that there was one group of persons or another. There were many, many people in attendance.
All right. Witness, remember we're now still talking about the big meeting in Kapsaret Forest. What has Mr. Ruto got to do with it? Can you tell us? You mentioned his name.
Ndio. Bwana
Yes.
alikuwa akipigania kiti.
Mr. Ruto was looking for power. He wanted to come to power. In other words, he was like the leader or the chief of the Kalenjins. I say so because there was one Koi Kalel Arab Somoy who and I do recall that, in fact, this name was given to Mr. Ruto as the chief of the Nandi because Arab Samoy had actually died.
The question I'm asking is still about the big meeting in Kapsaret Forest. Was it your understanding that Mr.
Nous sommes en audience publique, Monsieur le Président.
We are in public session, Mr. President.
Please proceed, Ms. Renton.
Witness, one of the names you mentioned was Eldet Kirui. Is that correct?
Ndio.
The witness, yes.
Witness, you've told us that money was distributed during the campaign. Was money distributed during this meeting?
Ndio.
Answer yes.
How much money?
Pesa kiasi sikujua ni kiasi gani, lakini
Answer. I do not know the amount of money that was given out. In any event, money was distributed at all the meetings.
Talking specifically about this meeting again, I understand you don't know how much money was given out. Do you know who provided the money?
nasema mkutano ulikuwa na vyo.
Answer. My answer is as follows. These meetings were organized by some persons.
Talking specifically about this meeting, who organised this big meeting in Kapsaret?
Nasema mkutano ulikuwa umeandaliwa mkubwa.
Answer. The big meeting was organized by Mr. Ruto.
Mr. President, if I could be of some assistance.
Please proceed.
Yeah, the Kiswahili translation is not quite correct because the witness said the meeting was organized for Mr. Ruto, not by Mr. Ruto in Kiswahili.
So I'll ask the question. Witness, can you tell us what your evidence was? Did you say the meeting was organized by Mr. Ruto, or did you say it was organized for Mr. Ruto?
Tarudia tena. Nataka nisi.
Please ask your question again. But this is what I meant. This is what I wanted to say. Ruto was the spokesperson of the Kalenjins. And whenever he attended a meeting, the Nandis would come in their numbers. That is why I couldn't distinguish who had organized the meeting. But as far as I knew, there was no one else who could have organized the meeting, because each meeting was prepared and organized, and this was done by the person who was supposed to speak at the meeting.
Counsel, proceed.
Witness, did anyone speak at the big Kapsaret meeting?
Nifafanulie kidogo nijue.
Could you please explain your question further?
Talking about the big meeting in Kapsaret, were there any speeches? Did anyone speak to the people that were there?
Ndio.
Yes.
Who spoke? Who made speeches?
Niliambiwa kuna watu walitoa hotuba kwa mkutano.
Answer. I was told that some people spoke at that meeting. They had come in a group. You see, in Kenya, when a president is to be selected, members of parliament are also selected as well as councillors. So you see, when a meeting is organized by a dignitary, you would have the councillors and the parliamentarians attending, and each of them would speak. So several persons spoke at the rally, but I don't know their names specifically.
Do you have any details about what specifically was said at any point during this meeting?
Kama vile nilivyosema.
Answer. As I have already stated, they talked about the elections campaign. However, the most important thing is that they wanted the Kikuyu to leave. That was the aim or the purpose of those meetings. And I also said that I have had a previous experience in this matter. So that's why I said a short while ago that they were cooking something.
Again, focusing on the big meeting in Kapsaret specifically, how were the Kikuyu meant to leave?
Nikifafanua kwa urefu kidogo.
Answer. Well, for further information, I can say that they wanted the Kikuyu to go to Nyiru, where Kibaki comes from. You see, the Kikuyu vote for Kibaki.
Council, 1 second. A witness, we're still talking about the big meeting in Kapsaret Forest. Do you know of anything in particular that was said at that meeting that led you to believe that the purpose of the meeting also entailed the idea that Kikuyus must leave? I'm interested in whether you know if any words in particular were said at the meeting that led you to believe that the idea was to have Kikuyus out of the area.
Ndio.
So, yes.
Were those words that were said that led you to that belief?
Kuna mambo yalisemwa hawataki sangara.
Answer. Some things were said, for example, like they do not want any sangara at the meeting. They also said that they did not want any madoa-doa at the meeting. And that was not new in any event, because these are things that had been said over and over again. And that is how I got to know that something was going to happen.
When they said they did not want any sangara, or that they did not want any madoa-doa, did they mean they did not want any sangara or madoa-doa at the meeting, the big meeting in Kapsaret Forest? Or did they mean something else by that?
Hiyo habari ya kusema hawataki sangara.
Answer. When they said that they did not want any sangara, it did not mean that they did not want sangara at the meeting. They were saying to those who were at that meeting that they should know that the sangara were not to be found again in the Rift Valley region, that they did not want the madoa-doa to remain in the Rift Valley region. So the idea behind the war was to drive out the sangara.
Thank you. Ms. Retton.
Witness, what does sangara mean? Can you explain that word to us?
Sangara maana yake
Sangara means Sangara means bad weed. Bad weed which grows deep roots and invades the whole area. So to weed out Sangara, you need to work very hard. And if you want further information, I can tell you that when a Kikuyu buys a piece of land, that piece of land becomes very important for the Kikuyu. So they were saying that if Kikuyus bought land in their area, the Kikuyus would not leave the area easily because they will dig in their roots and remain on their land forever. That is why reference was made to Sangara. Sangara, a bad weed which once planted is very difficult to uproot. So anyone who sold land would get money for it but would lose their land. So if anybody took my money and called me Sangara and wanted to take back my land and burn my house and take my cows, leaving me with nothing, that would be exactly the situation, because that is how the word was used.
Mr. President, just a question for guidance. And the reason I ask is, to what extent should it be allowed for the witness to go way extensively out of what is contained in the statement? Because none of this that is being testified about is in the statement. We had no notice of this. Of course, we can raise it in cross-examination, but the question is, to what extent would the chamber allow a witness to go way out of what is contained in this statement, especially on issues that are at the heart of this case and are disputed? Your guidance would be quite useful in this regard. Thank you.
Ms. Renton, any response?
Your Honours, I'm certainly intending to elicit information on the basis of the statement with my questions. Obviously, I can't help if the witness offers more information, and I certainly don't think it's necessarily unexpected given the subject matter.
Indeed, Mr. Fall, I think that if there's a basis, sufficient springboard in this statement, it's a little too unnatural to expect that the witness must be cut off from following a certain line of information, giving it. Your concern would, of course, be if a completely new subject area is opened up by the questioner or by the prosecutor, subject matter that is not within reasonable contemplation of the statement. Is that your argument?
That is indeed my argument, Mr. President. But more fundamentally also is that we are even at a loss now as to whether the witness is testifying about his own views or is testifying about a meeting to which he was not present but was told about it. And from the information that is available, what was told to him was so limited that all this thing that is being testified about is so completely new. But this is something we can clear up in cross-examination. I was just wondering whether your honors would permit the testimony to be extended way out of what is reasonably to be expected in view of the statement. But we leave it in your capable hands, Mr. President.
All right. Why don't we leave it at that? You've indicated your concern is basically your I see this as a warning, or rather a word of caution for the prosecutor as well. we can proceed.
Witness, you've talked about the reference to Sangara at the big Kapsaret meeting, and you said, so the idea behind the war was to drive out the Sangara. How were the Sangara going to be driven out?
Sangara kwa ufupi wangeondoa Sangara.
Answer. To sum up, the Sangara were driven out because I also lost my property. I lost my cows and my house was burnt down. So how could I stay in a location where I no longer owned a thing?
I understand, witness, that you're talking about what happened to you. At the meeting, was it discussed how the Sangara would be driven out?
That is obviously a leading question. She can ask what was discussed at the meeting, but to suggest to him that the Sangara may or may not have been discussed is definitely a leading question.
In response, Ms. Frenton.
Your Honours, I understand from the witness's testimony that he's already talked about the Sangara having to leave at that meeting. So my question is, directly on the basis of that, how were they to be driven out?
Could we be guided as on the section of the transcript which says that the Sangara was discussed at the meeting?
I believe it's page 71.
The witness did testify to that.
All right, Mr. President.
So the objection is overruled. Ms. Renton, proceed.
Mr. Witness, I'll repeat my question. At the big meeting in Kapsaret, was it discussed how the Sangara would be driven out?
Ndio.
Answer yes.
How was that to happen?
Kama vile nilivyosema hapo mwanzo.
Answer as I just said previously. They described us as Sangara. And I shall repeat my testimony. I lost all my possessions. My house was burnt down. I was not the only one in that position. When I talk of Sangaras that were due to be driven out, well, in my personal experience, I knew that the Sangara were due to be driven out because at that moment in time there was no help coming from the outside. I'm talking about what I personally saw. My house was burned down and there were police officers present They were observing. And no Kikuyu could arm themselves, and were they to dare to do so, they would be killed. The Nandis were armed with machetes, bows, arrows. And even if the police were present, they couldn't request anything. Well, if I saw people who were killed and cut into pieces in the presence of the police, and that is why I'm saying this to the bench. So, why would the Sangara not have been driven out? What else can I say to you? And were the Sangara not to be driven out, well, how would they then have been uprooted from the area?
Mr. Witness, if I can ask you to listen to my question very carefully. I understand that your experience is that the Sangara were ultimately uprooted from the area. My question is whether at the meeting it was discussed how to do this.
Nafikiri nimeambia koti.
So, I believe that I told the bench that, well, I gave an example with reference to the Sangara, saying that they were the Kikuyu. I do not know quite what I'm supposed to say in this regard, with reference to the Sangara.
The information that the lawyer is after, what she wants to find out from you, is whether from the information that came to you, whether any words were said at the big meeting in Kapsaret Forest, words about methods that would be used in uprooting the Sangara from the Rift Valley. Were there any particular words that were said that would suggest the method of removing the Sangara? Do you know? If you don't know, you can also tell us that. Remember my advice to you in the beginning, only tell us what you know. Thank you.
Witness, yes.
Do you know if any words were said in the big meeting that suggested the method of driving out the Sangara?
Ndio.
Witness, yes.
Wajua
the strategy used to drive the Sangara out of the Rift Valley area was quite obvious. At that moment in time, people were saying that the whites had to leave. And before the conflict itself, there were people making arms such as bows and arrows. They were making weapons. And from 1992 until 2007, the only way to drive the Sangara out was to bring on a war. I believe that that is what I meant to say to the bench. That is what I intended to tell them so that they could understand the situation.
think we've already established that Muzungu, that's what the witness was saying, something different from, it need not be white, it could also be stranger. But, witness, is it let me tell you where the difficulty is, so maybe that will give you an idea. You told us that from your experience in 1992, during the 1992 elections, there was violence, and you were a victim of that violence. And here we are, also discussing events in 2007. At the end of the day, we have to think, the judges here will have to think whether what happened in 2007 was something that happened without somebody saying, go and do this. In other words, whether people who knew what happened in 1992 had automatically started doing the same thing in 2007 without being told to do that. Or whether in 2007 somebody had gone about saying to people, yes, go ahead and uproot the Sangara. Now, we want you to tell us the truth, and only the truth. If it is something you know, you tell us that. If it is something that you do not know, you do not have first-hand information about, you can tell us you do not know, but you are speaking only from your own experience. It is for that reason that we want to know, and the lawyer is asking you in particular, whether any words had been said at the big meeting in Kapsaret about methods that would be used in driving out the Sangara. If you have no information on that, you can tell us too. Do you understand?
Sina lingine la kuongezea kuhusu hivyo.
Answer. I have nothing further to add apart from what I have already said.
Thank you. And that helps us. Ms. Renton, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honour. Witness, I'll now like to ask you some questions about the time of the announcement of the election results. It's undisputed that the result of the presidential election was announced on the 30th of December 2007. When did you hear the results of the presidential election?
Ilikuwa usiku.
Answer. It was in the evening.
And Kibaki was declared the winner, is that correct?
Ndio.
Answer. Yes, indeed.
What was the reaction to these announcements in your area?
Wakati watu walisikia kwamba Kibaki ameshinda.
Answer. When people heard that Kibaki had won the elections, I'm talking here about the Kikuyu, well, they started to celebrate. Some beat drums and there were great festivities all over, everywhere.
Peke yake, mashamba yaliyo karibu ya Wakikuyu.
the Kikuyu farms and farms in Oweti, etc., and people living in those farms started to celebrate. But with regard to what I saw, where I was, well, after the celebrations, a little while later, the Nandi fought back. They did not celebrate.
Duru na kuna shangwe.
I would like to make a distinction between the cries that they made and celebrations as such. The shouts or cries were very loud, and men came out. There were approximately 20 of us, and we went together to a hill. I left the children behind at home, and I closed the gate. We heard people shouting. There was fire, and they started to burn the houses down. We understood that the situation had worsened, and each and every one of us took the decision to go home, and we opened our doors. It was at night time, and then the situation worsened again. There were fires burning everywhere, and that is how it unfolded throughout the night. From approximately 7 o'clock until 1400 hours, the situation remained the same.
Your Honours, if I could just ask one or two questions in private session, please.
I will go briefly into private session.
Nous sommes en audience publique, Monsieur le Président.
Court Officer, we are in open session, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. President, proceed, please.
Witness, who was making the shouts or cries that you heard on that evening?
Ni Wanandi.
Answer. It was the Nandi.
Can you describe the shout or the cry for the people inside the court? Thank you.
Ndio.
Answer. Yes.
Sound like?
Niseme ama nipige nduru hiyo ama niseme vile inamaanisha.
Answer. Would you like me to imitate the shouts, or would you like me to give me the meaning behind those shouts?
Both. Could you start by imitating the shout?
Ndio.
So yes.
Please go ahead.
Walisema ooh.
Ooh, 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 ooh.
I don't know if it's necessary to describe that for the record, is it? I guess it's
Yes, you have to, Counsel.
A whooping sound?
We heard him say ooh, something like that, and that's it can be represented on the record by a series of O's, I imagine. If we do 4 or 5 of them, that would do.
I think that's sufficient, Your Honour. Thank you. And witness, what was the meaning of this sound?
Nduru hiyo wa Mwafrika.
Answer. For an African, such shouts, well, whenever an African has a problem, he will make such sounds, and if an individual nearby realizes this, then he can come to his assistance. I said that they had taken the decision to shout in such a manner because they were ready, and they started shouting whilst they came towards our area, and when they started to burn our houses down. And if anybody else could help them or come to their assistance, then they would go to those people, but then they would run the risk of being killed.
Your Honour, I'd just like to ask one question in private session, with your leave.
Yes, please. But witness, what you're saying is that the sound or the cry you made was not just a random noise, but it was meant to communicate. It was a call, a cry for help. Is that it?
Nasema ile nduru walikuwa wakipiga.
Answer. I said that the shouts that they uttered, well, they were shouting with a view to calling their brothers to come and help them. So, if a Kikuyu would then go out in order to assist them, they would come up against the enemy. So, they were shouting out in a way such as to say, come out and then we'll kill you. This is the enemy.
All right. Thank you. And we'll go into private session. Ms. Renton.